I'm so glad you're here. You guys glad to be in the house of God? I'm Pastor Corey, by the way. This is the lovely Pastor Aaron. We decided today to go casual, it looks like. I see you're wearing a hoodie. I'm wearing this. She let me wear these pants today, so I was pretty happy about that. Also, I seem to be into Formula One racing now, so I don't have a favorite team. Anybody into Formula One racing? I just love the politics. I hate church politics. Are you into Formula One racing? I love politics when it's not church politics. I think it's great. I should coach a minor hockey team or get involved in figure skating or something. But I don't have a favorite team yet, and so red matches my eyes, so I thought I would start wearing Ferrari stuff. I bought some other stuff too, so anyways. If you're new to church, sorry. This is sort of what we do. We really want to connect you with God and connect you with people, but we do enjoy ourselves at the same time. So also, if you're a first-time visitor here, I'm super curious how that invite went from your friend who got you here, because we're in the middle of a passive-aggressive series. So I'm curious, what that sounded like. You should come to my church. What are you guys talking about? Oh, it'll apply. I've been praying a long time that this would happen. So anyways, if you're new to church, welcome. Go out to the 7-minute party after. We'd love to connect with you as well. I have a great friend, Pastor Quincy, who's the exec on staff at EC in Calgary, who's also on our director's board. So he's going to be preaching next week. So I get a bit of a break from preaching next week. So that's going to be awesome. He's just a great guy. You're going to love him. And also, there's a men's breakfast. Ladies, sign your men up to that men's breakfast on Saturday morning at 10 here at the church. So I have a special word from God coming for that. I don't have it yet, but it's coming. I have faith. It's coming. Okay. How you doing back there? I feel like you got super quiet. Hey, if this is... That was amazing. How many years have you been waiting to do that? I am so impressed with you right now. That was incredible. Sean's an introvert. We got any introverts in the house? I know most of your comebacks come at about 2 a.m. But I think he's been working. I think he wrote that one down about 3 years ago and he just trotted it out. So that was great. Now, because I'm talking about passive aggressiveness in this series, fair warning that this content has already been prepared for a few weeks. So please don't get out in your car and tell your spouse, you told Pastor what I said last week. This has been prepared for a few weeks. So here's what I would say about this whole thing is if you're, and we're not going to call you passive aggressive or me passive aggressive. We're going to say we get in passive aggressive moods because you can change your mood. So we're not going to internalize it. You're a son of God. You're a daughter of heaven. We don't have to be like this anymore. God can change us. So, but just if the shoe seems like it fits during the sermon, you were already wearing it. So just relax. It's going to feel personal, I would say. And it's also no good calling me passive aggressive to get out of this. Because that is a skill that you learned. In passive-aggressive moods is a skill that you learn, probably from your family of origin, that today we're going to unlearn passive-aggressiveness. We're going to learn from Jesus that we don't have to be like that anymore. But sometimes what we do, and it's one of the techniques I'm going to be talking about today, is the techniques of passive-aggressiveness. We need to learn different skills. Today's sermon is called Nice Ninjas. So I'm going to be talking about, but ninjas are still here to kill you, no matter how nice you are. So... But this whole idea of just calling me, I've already explained, I'm not really a passive-aggressive personality type. I lean more towards just being good at being aggressive. So that's what God normally is working on in my life. But it's a mood that we can sometimes get in. So Absolom has a people gift. Absolom is King David's son. Something horrible happened to his sister we talked about last week. We talked about, hey, this all begins in a very legitimate wound that probably happened a long time ago to you. But then that wound turned into murder, and then today you're going to see that it turns into something else altogether, is that he murders the person who hurt his sister. And It's funny that Absolom today, you're going to find out, has a very legitimate people gift. Now, you can have a gift from God. I think everybody's got something that they're just, God, it just comes easy to you. And sometimes even that with the passive-aggressive type of mood that we get in, sometimes that can be coupled with a very dangerous thing, which is a gift of God to influence people. And so now you're influencing people. Absolom influences a bunch of people, but everybody he influences today, you're going to find out ends up dying, because he used his gift from God to influence them for the work of the enemy. So, but also he has a people gift. So, does that make sense? My brother Ryan has a people gift. He always has had one. And I'm always making fun of Ryan. And you're like, oh, does he really love his brother? I love him. But if he was here right now, he doesn't care what I say about him. He's so cool. But just so you know, as a church family, I called him up the other day. And we had a good talk, and we're friends. Like, he's a great guy. I just make fun of him because he's not here to zing me. Maybe mostly. So anyways, thanks, Sean. So let's start in this place here. Where does your mood go? In and around. I think this is probably maybe the easiest place to see passive-aggressive moods. Where does your mood go when you might make a mistake about something, or you feel challenged about something, or somebody is trying to bring up something that maybe you did or said that wasn't great. So you imagine this now. You've made a mistake. Now, don't go there yet on me now. I'm not saying you did. I'm saying you might have made a mistake about something. But if you maybe made a mistake about something, I think this is where we see it, and it starts exposing the passive-aggressive attitudes. Then what happens is, once it starts, though, because over long years of practice in arguments and conflict, over long years of practice, it will go down a certain trail, and it ends up in crazy town. It's a slippery slope. So I'm going to suggest that there's probably something that you can learn that will kind of avoid the whole thing from maybe even having a chance to start. And so I think we need to build phrases and things that we say when we're starting to feel challenged, or somebody brings up something at work of like, hey, you might have messed this up, you know. So how do you, because normally it just goes like, offense is the best defense. What happens is sometimes you're like, nod and smile and take it, but inside you start getting bitter and then vengeful, and then we start like, oh, you're going to pay for that, you know. Or we hide and we blame shift and we do all these things. I'm going to talk about some of the techniques that we've learned over time, but if we build a simple phrase before we get there, then you don't have to put the bullets in the gun like we normally do. You know, you don't have to be sharpening the knife. You can actually, let's build a phrase that sort of starts diffusing things. There's a phrase that this phrase also, it needs to make you smile. Because when you're in a passive-aggressive mood, everybody has to take you very seriously. So, are you following me? Like, when you're in a bad mood about something, everybody's got to take you as seriously as you're taking you. But sometimes it's so ridiculous that I think if you build a phrase that you can smile, then maybe you can laugh. And if you laugh, maybe you can change. So that's how I kind of look at this, of like, if I build a good phrase here, then maybe I can have a little laugh at myself, and then, because everybody else is going to be laughing anyways, sooner or later. So I worked with a guy named Lee in Sundre. Anybody ever been to Sundre? Beautiful town. And so some of our crew, I used to be an electrician, so they had hung a bunch of lights in a big shop. So it would be a space, it was probably about like this space, with a bunch of fluorescent lights screwed to a tin ceiling. So I went in, I got called in there because some of the lights were starting to come down, and they were just hanging on the wires that they were on, or starting to fall. One side of the light would come down, which is not great for electricity and stuff. So I get in there with my bucket truck. I get up there and I find out that the lights have only been screwed up with one tapping screw on each side of the light. So just into tin, straight up, like that will work its way out. And a tapping screw, if you don't know, it's already a drill bit on the end of it, so it's not the best. And 2 screws is not the best for any light anyways, unless you're going into something like concrete. But the guy who had done it was too lazy to find out where the roof trusses were, or to put in like 8 screws, which would have been fine, you know. So I got back to the shop, and I'm like, hey, who did this? Who did that shop? Who hung those lights there? And Lee's like, yeah, that was me. And I'm like, so you know that some of the lights are coming down because you put like 2 screws in them, you know, and these are big lights. And I'm like, 2 screws in them. And he goes, you ready for the phrase? If you can learn this, if you just take this home today, I'd be happy. Ready? He goes, fair enough. But in my defense, with a big smile on his face. And I thought, how did he do that? Now I'm smiling because I think it's funny. He goes, fair enough, but in my defense, like, I was in a hurry to get to lunch, or I didn't like that town. I don't like my job. I don't like the guy I was working with. Fair enough, but in my defense. And then he gets to say something. And I thought, that was quite brilliant that he had somewhere along the way learned to say, like, fair enough, like, may have a legitimate concern. But in my defense, I just screwed it up because here's my reason for it, Rather than just going straight to the reason, and often it's like, no, the light's not hanging down. No, rather than go there, I thought, what a great phrase to learn. So as we have hope that you may have learned a bunch of bad behaviors, and over time, it has created a rut in your mind and in your vocabulary of like, you always go here. Well, you don't have to. We can unlearn that and let Jesus teach us some new skills, because it's a skill that you learned. It's not getting you anything you want, but it's a skill that you learned that Jesus would rather teach you some better skills here. So the first skill that you maybe learned was distraction. So when you're in a passive-aggressive mood, you are just amazing at this. It's like the other person is bringing up the light that is hanging, and you're like, yeah, well, you screwed this up, and you did this. And like multiple argument lines to distract. Or what you can do if you're in a passive-aggressive mood is you can bring up something that's kind of painful to the other person. So watch this. It's like a manipulation that can be so timed and so painful that it brings up, can past pain for other people, or it just brings up something that gets them off the track where their concern matters anymore. And you're either like, all my concerns matter far more than this, or remember, and so I was asking Pastor Erin, I was working on this, and she said, tell the story of the cracked windshield. And I said, but everyone likes you more, and they'll think I'm a bad person if I do. And then she said, that's why I want you to tell it. I just made that last part up. But she said to tell the story. So Aaron and I were having an argument. Pastor Aaron and I were having an argument one time. I call her Pastor Aaron here. I know that she's a pastor. She doesn't need me to say that. Sometimes we need to remember that, though, if that makes sense. Like, it's good to remember, because if you give a title, sometimes it allows them to be able to correct you when God... Okay, anyways, that's for free. Now, so Pastor Aaron... Well, she wasn't pastoring in the car at the time because she was losing an argument to me. So we were in the car. I think Nassia was in the car. I don't know where Nassia is, but Nassia is Sean's wife, and she was in the car at the time. I can't remember if anybody else was in there. And Pastor Aaron was all about good fat. So you guys know what I mean by good fat? Everybody's immediately looking at my stomach right now. Stop it. There's a 6-pack in there somewhere, covered by a 12-pack. All right. So good fat and bad fat. So bad fat would be, a McDonald's hamburger. Good fat would be avocados. Everything. It's always avocados. So avocados and like almonds or something, right? And so Pastor Aaron says, she's talking about good fat. And I'm like, so just because I like an argument and I just like to see what happens. I'm like, but too much good fat could be bad fat though, right? And she said, no. And I knew I had her. Because Pastor Aaron has trouble backtracking. I'm just going to say. She had trouble going back in an argument. And I'm like, I've got her now. So this is me. I'm pressing forward. The Spirit of the Lord is with me. And I'm like, so too much good fat can't be bad fat? And she's like, no, because she already said it. Then I said, okay, so I eat 50 pounds of avocados and almonds a day. I weigh 1,500 pounds. I need a crane to get out of the house. But that's good fat. You see, it was such a good argument. So. Then she says, when are you going to get your windshield fixed? Then I started looking at my windshield, and I had just replaced it, I think. And I got a rock. You know how it is that you fix a windshield, and like the next week, you follow a gravel truck because that seems like a good idea, or whatever it was. And I'm like, that's going to cost me like $400 or $500. 5 minutes later, I came back. And I'm like, you! I was winning the other thing and you changed it to this thing. And this is painful to me because it's going to cost me money. Distraction. Let's not talk about this. Let's talk about anything else. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. Let's look at that. That thing's shiny, you know. That thing's painful, you know. Anyways. So, can too much good fat be bad fat? Did we record that? No, I'm dead serious. Is that on? Is that all the equipment didn't fail right then? Okay. The second thing that we learned along the way, Aaron, I love you. You know that I love you. The second thing, but I won that argument. The second thing is this deception. So deception is like selective storytelling. So now it's like, I'm going to beef this up with part of the story. Part of it will be very true, but you're only picking the part that's true to your side of the argument, right? And so this whole good fat, bad fat thing was mostly because I hate eating salad, and I hadn't figured out how I was going to not eat salad, right? So, but it's like deception. All of a sudden, it's selective storytelling. We always, we try to say around here, when you're going up the ladder at work, just give them all the information. Like, don't start selecting things. It really limits people's options. And when people are trying to decide things that, your boss is dealing with a lot of money and she wants to know that she has actual information to, selective storytelling. I'm going to tell this side of the story, and then this side of the story is going to get, and then what it starts happening is twisting a little bit, adding things, removing things. Rather than just letting the story be the story, we start adding our own truth to it, which isn't really true because it's not in context with everything, right? So sometimes when we say this, I'm just being honest, what we mean is I'm mad and I'm talking. But honesty, okay, are you being honest if you're angry and telling a lie? Can an honest person tell a lie in that moment? Well, no, because honesty has to do with the truth, right? And so we start selectively storytelling. And then what happens when we're in a passive-aggressive mood is we have an incredible ability. Over time, you'll find that as you are saying your story, even in your mind, see, to get what you want from the other person or in the scenario, you have to present something to them. So as you're telling them, you're trying to convince them of this, but then what starts happening is that in that mood, I convince myself. Remember now, the passive-aggressive voice is really the only voice in their head until another voice from the enemy starts to ride in and take it over. So I've known people that were so passive-aggressive that they believed what they were saying while they started saying it, while they made up a story. And I've seen this happen all the time, not all the time, but in certain scenarios of the person talking, and everybody in the room knows that that's not true. The number is twice as big as it was 5 minutes ago. And as they say it, they believe it. The Bible talks about you can actually get to this point as a person where you lose your capacity for the truth. Because remember now, your voice is the only voice in your head. Because when you were small, your voice didn't matter, and now it's the only one that matters. And so selective storytelling, self-deception. Here's the thing that the voice in your head won't point out: when it's wrong. It doesn't put its hand in the air and you're like, who's being an idiot right now? This guy, Do you know that your brain was in full agreement with every stupid thing you've ever done? It's not pointing that out. It's not like, I think you could do better than me. I think you should go and talk to that person because I think you're an idiot. You keep listening to me. This is clearly crazy. Okay. The third thing is, so what have we come through so far? We've come through, is it up there? Okay, distraction, deception. Here's one, projection. So we start projecting our issues on the other person. I think this is kind of like the number one indicator maybe of passive aggressiveness is this is a skill that you learn probably really young is like, if I get to the word first, you don't get to call me that. So it's like, it's funny that when God is working on you, if you have an anger problem or a lying problem, it's funny how when God is working on you and shedding light on you, that in this mood, it's funny, every relationship in your life will start looking like angry liars. You know what I'm saying? It's like you start seeing it everywhere except you. And then what happens with a passive-aggressive technique that is learned behavior that we have to unlearn is that, have you ever been with somebody that they're like screaming in anger at you and saying that you're angry while you're just sitting there? Right? So they're projecting their issue. Somebody's like, man, my mom. Like, hey, love and forgive your mom. It's okay. She was probably broken too. But it's just this whole idea of like, this, you know what your problem is? And then you tell them actually what your problem, what God is trying to work on you. So if I'm with a passive-aggressive person as a pastor, it's projecting. So have I been called passive-aggressive in this sermon series? Yes. It's just an old trick. I can just look at the things that somebody would be bringing to me. I can look at those words and be like, oh, I don't have to diagnose them anymore. They did. I just pick those words out and I'm like, okay. Like, click, click. I guess we know what we need to work on right now. So, I mean, it sounds funny, but like, come on, guys. This is one tactic that the devil loves that he taught you. Because it says that the devil is the accuser of the brethren. Right. The Bible says, judge not lest you be judged. Now, there are times when you got to judge your kids. Like, I get it. But be very careful because the same judgment that you measure out will be measured back to you. And if the devil can get you to accuse, then he doesn't have to. So he can stay home and watch Netflix while you do his job for him. And I think that you know that in arguments, you've been doing his job for him, and I do too. And so we got to be like this place of like, I'm not doing your job for it. You work for it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're going to do it, then you do it. But I'm not going to do that anymore. Now, can I explain? Here's what often happens if a passive-aggressive mood kind of person is with a healthier person. When they say, your problem is this person who is bringing up their issue kind of stops and they're like, oh. And then they take a little internal walk and they back up a little and they start thinking like, I wonder if that's true. Because this person, if you're healthy, you'll own your piece of the pie no matter how big it is, right? So, but now this person is questioning this person and so is the other person. So now two people are questioning one person. And when you're passive-aggressive mood, you probably learned that when the other person backs up a little bit and gives a little space, then you're like, I knew it was you. And then you just go for it, you know? And so these are things that we just have to start unlearning. Because then what we have to do is we move into recruitment. So this is a part where Absolom has a gift with people. So this is in public now, when I'm in a passive-aggressive mood with my wife, then I'm trying to win an argument. Now we're in public, and now what I have to do is I got to get somebody on my team about this. So then I start recruiting. So as a pastor, I hear this all the time. There's something else I wanted to say in there somewhere. No, not yet. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. Everybody thinks you're crazy. You don't even know everybody, so probably not. But when a pastor hears that, we know that, like, and I'm not the only one who thinks that. That normally means that they are the only one who thinks that because they have to say that. The other side of that, too, is if a person is married, if a passive-aggressive person is married, not that there's not a legitimate concern tucked away in there somewhere, but the tactic of, like, accusation, when we start getting a little bit off that way, then we have to say, like, and I'm not the only one who thinks that because your argument probably isn't strong enough on its own. So now you need a little bit of beefing up there, and then you drag your poor spouse into it, and your spouse doesn't want you to make their life a living hell, which you probably already are. So they kind of got to go with it and be like, okay, I don't want to sleep on the couch, like that's not fun. And if you have a Canadian friend, and you've been talking to them about it, then what happens is they didn't say anything because they're like, what's happening now? Because you're like super upset, you want to win an argument. They didn't say anything because Canadians lack courage. And so we would rather be a part of this thing and just nod and smile because we don't want you not to like us. The worst thing in Canada is somebody thinking that you're not nice. Well, the truth doesn't feel that way, but you're supposed to speak the truth in love and be like, hey, well, hold on. I don't want to get in this thing with your wife, and I don't know that that's even true. So that's what we lack the courage to do. But then the person takes the silence as like, yeah, they agree with me too, when you probably don't. You just kind of got caught in this little weird thing that you don't know what to do with. Then it goes into number 5, public dishonor, eventually. It starts as passive-aggressive. When I'm in a passive-aggressive mood, I will not be grateful. I will not be thankful. I will not tell my kids something I appreciate about them. I want to be appreciated. I want to be seen. I'm not going to see you. I'm not going to tell you something. I'm not going to honor you for something that in my expression, I'll start withholding my facial things. I'll start looking a little crazy. You know what I'm saying? I wish I could video you and show it back to you. Just could be like, that's a crazy person. We start withholding in our body language. In the meeting of needs, we start doing things like not answering people. Anybody really good at the silent treatment? Well, some honest person here. Everyone else is being silent. I got it, right? But it's like silent. You're just going to withhold. You're just not going to say it for 10 seconds. You're just going to, right? It just starts in on this. Somebody remind me I should put this in my notes, but I forgot it already. In the meeting of needs. And then what happens is, if you notice this, we start closing down. And when we withhold, we close so that then we start rolling our eyes and we start turning away. Our body language is very important, you know. You're being passive-aggressive with your kids, you'll turn away from them. You'll refuse affection. You'll walk away while they're still talking. They're not done talking yet. You'll walk away. Why? Because you don't want to talk about the things. So you've learned this thing. I walk away. I'll close a door. I'll slam a door. I'll stomp around. I'll mutter stuff over here. Right? You know what I'm saying? This is like nothing that anybody can really put their finger on. Okay. The other service was into this. What happens what happens is you'll start publicly dishonoring the other person because you feel like you're being dishonored, but it's not really probably happening like you think. This removes you from the land of awe and wonder. So as soon as, you know why people went crazy in COVID? Because we couldn't worship together. Worship brings awe and wonder. The Bible says in places like awe and wonder makes your brain work. Your brain stops working when you lose a sense of awe. And you stop, in relationship, man, you stop thinking right. It removes you from awe and wonder. Honor is what brings that to you. Now, here's why honor is so important. It has nothing to do with the other person. It has to do with you. Because if you won't sow it, you can't reap it. God is trying to honor you. He can't do it unless you sow it. And so if you want honor, then all of a sudden you start publicly dishonoring. Then the clock is ticking. And you are going to be publicly dishonored because that's what you sowed. And so many of us, we want honor, like honor me, honor me, honor me, but you're not sowing it. So I'm not sowing it. So 2 Samuel 14, let's get into the scripture. Absalom was praised as the most handsome man in all Israel. He was flawless from head to foot. You're seeing this like, he's everything that everybody wants to be. Flawless from head to foot, man. That's a description. So like not Layden. Or Anthony. Chad. Maybe a dozy. Yeah, what? His wife won't even look up. Oh, yeah, look at her. No, I'm just busy taking notes. What? Something happened that was funny? It says he cut his hair only once a year, and then only because it was so heavy. So this is not my problem. Okay, I'm not going to do it. I did in the first service. I'm not going to do it. This is somebody else's also not problem. And then because it was so heavy, when he weighed it out, it came to 5 pounds. So once a year, he would get a haircut, and it weighed 5 pounds. And so all this glorious hair, he had this thing. He's just looked great, you know. But you'll find out when I finish the sermon series off that his hair hung him up in a tree, too, and got him killed. Anyways, let me get into this. So his sister is hurt. He ends up murdering his brother. Then he flees for 3 years. 3 years he's outside of Israel. He goes and lives with his grandfather. And then he comes back, but David doesn't bring him into his presence. We're not really sure why that is. I don't know if David was having mercy on him or what, but or maybe he just didn't know what to do. But he said he must never come into my presence. So he goes back to his old home of bitterness. Now, it must have been the same home that his sister was in where he's watched this. So 3 years he's been gone to stew about all of this. Now he's back in his house, but there's no resolution. And so he goes back to his home. 2 years he's been in his home, and he never got to see the king. It says, after this, he bought a chariot and horses, and he hired 50 bodyguards to run ahead of him. 50 guys, like, to run ahead to what? I don't. Guys, go to 7-Eleven. I'm coming. I want a Slurpee. You know, like, what are we doing with 50 guys? And why bodyguards? That's a weird word. I was wondering about that. Bodyguards. To protect him from what? I think he's starting to get paranoid. I think he's starting to get to this place of like, well, I better do something before somebody does something to me. You know what I'm saying? Bodyguards. David didn't want to hurt him. It was clear. Who wants to hurt him? I don't know if anybody does. But we almost get this kind of super victim mentality. Everybody's out to get me. I don't think that that's true. I think that people love you. And if you don't feel like that, go to a small group. I don't know how many times we're going to say it. Go to a small group. You'll find that people love you. Go serve on a team. Serve somebody. But he got up early every morning and went out to the gate of the city. So just picture this, the gate of the city. When people brought a case to the king for judgment, his administration, Absolom would ask where in Israel they were from, and they would tell him their tribe. So this is a little weird, because now it's almost like, where are you from? Oh, your tribe's not the tribe of Judah. That's our tribe, so the ruling tribe. Sometimes it can be a little tribalism of like, divide and conquer. You learn this really young, like, let's divide and conquer a little bit. Oh, you're from that tribe? Oh, yeah, you guys probably pay more taxes. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, you probably don't have it as... He's playing on something maybe here. Then he said to them, you ready? You've really got a strong case here. It's too bad the king doesn't have anyone to hear it. Ooh. So interesting. Catches them at the city gate and says, that's a really legitimate concern. Too bad. And then he starts sowing distrust. Too bad the king doesn't have anyone appointed to hear you. But here's the problem. They're still at the gate. He's actually telling them there's no point in moving towards the king. He can't help you. I can. He is diverting from the kingdom. But here's the thing. They're still at the gate. They don't even know if the king has somebody who can hear them or not. They don't even get that far. And sometimes this happens in churches too. I'm just going to say it. Like, it's like this mood starts getting into somebody, and then they start like, oh, the pastors don't see you. Oh, like, look, we have a lot of people in church, so that's a lot of kids, right? Oh, but they don't even have anybody who can. I'm like, no, we have small groups, guys. That's where we are seen and heard. That's where we're cared for and celebrated with and prayed over. And I'm like, no, there is something, but if you're going to sit there and turn somebody into you, you're taking them out of the supernatural power of the kingdom that is actually probably in play and probably in place. And so it's this weird little like, follow me, right? So then he says this, I wish I were the judge. And that's in our heart when we're in that. I wish I were the judge. I think this is where we kind of end up when we get in this way, is that it's almost this, just catch this, like, if I were my dad, I wouldn't have let that happen. If I were in charge at work, that wouldn't have happened. If I were, that person wouldn't have hurt me. If I was, you don't know that though. You don't know that. You don't know that. I don't think David could predict what his son Amnon would do. You can't predict crazy stuff like that. But to think to yourself, you start getting into this place where I wish I were the judge. And that's really what passive aggressiveness does. If I were the judge, we would have justice. He says, then everyone could bring their cases to me for judgment, and I would give them justice. These words, Christ follower, there's a better word I want to submit to you. Then everyone could bring their cases to me for judgment. Now he starts making promises nobody can keep. Everybody, millions of people in Israel are going to bring every case to you for judgment. And you are that wise and that smart. And you are, with one side of the story, going to be able to give them judgment. Millions of people. Really. Really. Everyone could bring it to me for judgment, and I would give them justice. What kind of justice? You mean payback? You mean payback? I think that's what we mean when we mean justice. When I want justice, I want somebody else to pay for what was done to me. But from David's point of view, I think he'd be like, justice for your sister's pain? What about justice for murdering the crown prince of Israel? Not that justice, though. Christ follower, have you already forgotten what you have been forgiven from? You didn't want justice, you wanted mercy. David actually showed him more mercy. Justice, payback, vengeance, it won't help you. It'll just make you into the very thing that you hate. When people tried to bow before him, Absolom wouldn't let them. Instead, he took them by the hand and kissed them, which is super gross. Absolom did this with everyone who came to the king for judgment. And so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. He steals their hearts. Every person's heart that he stole got killed. All right, nearly every person. All the warriors from that side got killed in a civil war. Orphaned their kids. Absolom gets 3 daggers in his heart. That's how he dies. Because he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. Those weren't his hearts. Those weren't for him to steal. I think it starts like this. You didn't protect me, God. I mean, Dad. Like, where were you? You don't get to rule me now. You don't get to tell me how to think and how to feel. You weren't there when that thing happened to me. Where were you? How can a loving God allow? Well, God didn't break the world. We did. He sent his own son to bleed out to save it. He owned my mistake. He paid my mistake. He paid my debt. I don't think we're thinking about this right at all. Because this is what Absolom is saying. Hey guys, in my experience, and you're going to find the same thing one day too, I'm going to protect you from the king. I'm going to protect you from the king. I think that that's what we do when we're in that mood, and that's been part of our life. I think we're now protecting ourselves from the king. From the king. And you have missed the principle that everything that you ever suffered, Jesus suffered with you. He was there with you. It happened to him too. Not just you, but everybody on the planet. The son of suffering, the man of sorrows, acquainted with our grief. He suffered with you. And then we turn into this thing that's like, I'm going to protect people from you. I'm going to protect my own heart from you because I'm the only one that can bring justice. And Jesus is like, you're going to have to let it go. Can't you see where I was? Can't you see the pain in my heart when that thing happened to you? I can't heal you if you won't open the door and start trusting me. Don't protect yourself from your Father. Don't protect yourself from the King.